Welcome to the deep dive. When we think of the Gilded Age in New York, our minds, well, they often jump straight to images of almost unbelievable opulence. You picture those grand mansions, right? Like the Vanderbilt's marble house. And glittering balls, crystal chandeliers, fortunes built by Astors and Morgans. We tend to see it as, rigidly formal, really steeped in those strict Victorian conventions, maybe even a bit stuffy. It's all about Mrs. Astor's formidable 400, isn't it? This tightly controlled, sort of impenetrable world.
And that public image, that carefully crafted facade. Yeah, that's absolutely correct as far as it goes anyway. But what our deep dive today really gets into is that beneath that, dazzling surface, a whole secret subculture thrived. It was a world woven with coded glances, whispered conversations, hidden signals, all subtly but profoundly defying those very Victorian norms. And this wasn't just a few people here and there. We're talking about a clandestine network. Gay men, lesbian partners, people defying gender norms. They didn't just exist within elite society, they were actively shaping it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because today our mission really is to peel back those heavy velvet curtains, take you on a journey behind the chandeliers. We want to reveal how these wealthy men and women in places like New York and Newport cultivated lives that were, in their own way, gloriously, defiantly queer. You might think of queerness as something, hidden in the shadows or maybe emerging much later, but we're going to show you how it was right there, present, powerful, embedded right at the top of the social ladder.
Absolutely. And our deep dive into this hidden history, it's built from a really fascinating mix of sources. There's meticulous historical research, of course, candid personal memoirs, some published much later, contemporary news accounts, too. If you read them closely, they offer surprising clues. And then there's groundbreaking scholarly work that, honestly, for too long has been overlooked or, frankly, maybe even intentionally suppressed. So these aren't just theories, it's not conjecture. We've pieced together well-documented facts. Sometimes it was hidden in plain sight, camouflaged by the social norms. Other times it was literally buried in private diaries, coded letters, even architectural blueprints. It's about excavating a truth that for a long time just wasn't discussed. Not in polite company, and definitely not in our history books.
And we're going to explore some truly compelling themes today. We'll peek into these lavish sanctuaries of style and desire, where these lives unfolded. We'll uncover the ingenious aesthetic codes like a secret language, and then delve into the very architecture of secrecy that protected these hidden worlds. We'll also look at the complex nuances of love in the margins, and, this is critical, the stark differences in who gets to hide, based on that immense privilege of class and race.
What's truly foundational here, and maybe the most surprising thing, is how queerness wasn't just present. It was absolutely intrinsic to how high society functioned, to its culture. It subtly but powerfully reshaped American aesthetics, social life, even the buildings, from within those exclusive circles. The influence, well, it wasn't always loud or explicitly acknowledged, but as we'll see, it was absolutely indelible. It left a legacy that, persists even today.
Get ready for some serious aha moments, because we're about to share some surprising facts that might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about this opulent but really complex period. Prepare to step onto a kind of secret stage where identities were performed, love was coded, and art itself became this act of quiet, beautiful rebellion. This is a story of incredible survival, profound creativity, and remarkable resilience, all set against that glittering and sometimes, deceiving backdrop of America's richest age. So let's start by really immersing ourselves in the heart of Gilded Age social power. Picture yourself in Manhattan in January 1883. It's the night of Mrs. Astor's annual ball, the absolute pinnacle of New York society. You can almost feel the hush as Mrs. Caroline Schermerhorn Astor herself described as a tall, commanding woman of formidable dignity, stood right at the head of the receiving line. She's in this elaborate ebony gown, pearls, diamonds glittering. She was the queen. And this ball, it wasn't just an event, it was the event.
And the ritual itself, it was just a mesmerizing spectacle. You had gaslights blazing through rows of these velvet red drawing rooms, casting this warm, almost theatrical glow on the masses of flowers banking all its splendid rooms. Two orchestras booming, filling the air with waltzes, echoing off marble walls, gilt-framed portraits. Yet despite all this overwhelming pomp, a palpable silence would fall as Mrs. Astor silently, imperiously, just judged the glittering parade of guests. This wasn't just a party to enjoy. It was a carefully choreographed performance, a high-stakes theater where everyone played a rehearsed part. And Mrs. Astor, she held the ultimate power of admission, receiving her calling card, that golden ticket, meant entry into the revered 400, our exclusive guest list. Without it, you were effectively exiled, condemned to linger indefinitely on the fringes. It was basically social death. So it sounds less like a party and more like a carefully managed production, almost a form of social engineering, really. What were the real stakes for people caught in the system? Was there any way to subvert it even slightly, or was it truly just this unbreakable hierarchy? That's a crucial question. The stakes were incredibly high. Social acceptance, it dictated everything. Business connections, marriage prospects, everything. And while it felt unbreakable at its core, it was a theatrical construct. Which brings us to the actual architect of that exclusivity, Mrs. Astor's partner in this grand social stagecraft, Ward McAllister. He was literally the man who wrote the guest list, meticulously curating who was in and who was out. McAllister famously quipped to the New York Tribune that there were only about 400 people in fashionable New York society, explaining that, if you go outside that number, you strike people who are either not at ease in a ballroom or else make other people not at ease. This rigid hierarchy, this illusion of exclusivity, it was itself a performance. Even audacious rule benders, like the ambitious Alva Vanderbilt, who famously tried to break into the 400 through sheer force of will and wealth, even she had to eventually play by Astor's rules, diligently leaving her card at Mrs. Astor's door until she finally got an introduction. The whole system was designed to appear exclusive and unyielding, but it was a performance everyone understood, and very few dared to openly challenge it.
That makes me wonder, what did these grand mansions, these opulent stage sets themselves, what did they truly conceal behind those dazzling facades? What secrets were literally hidden within their walls?
That's a deeply provocative question, and it's one architectural historians have really grappled with. As one researcher put it, architecture on the inside is not always what it seems on the outside. And that observation, it serves as a profoundly apt metaphor for Gilded Age society. These grand, imposing facades, often in neoclassical or French chateau styles, they frequently gave way to surprisingly labyrinthine interiors. We're talking about split-level floors, abrupt stairways, odd dark corners, an architectural puzzle. Designed, maybe unintentionally, maybe not, to facilitate discretion, to hide whispered truths and secrets buried in plain sight. Scholars who've really dug into this period consistently observed that during the Gilded Age, homosexuality was often concealed and not openly acknowledged. People and things were not always as they seemed on the surface, and the very architecture of their homes, with hidden passages, private boudoirs, it perfectly reflected this deep societal need for discretion.
And it wasn't just the physical spaces, right? But the social rituals themselves became this kind of elaborate coded language. You mentioned the strict calling card etiquette and the arcane dance it created. How did that specifically function as a covert communication system?
Oh, it was incredibly intricate. To an outsider, this etiquette might seem needlessly complex. A dizzying array of rules about when to call, how to fold a card, which corner to turn down, But to initiates, it was a precise signaling system, instantly conveying social standing, intentions, even unspoken messages. Receiving Mrs. Astor's card, for instance, wasn't just an invitation. It could instantly elevate a newcomer, signal their acceptance. Conversely, being uncalled meant remaining indefinitely on the fringes, a public statement of your social exclusion. The annual January balls were these must-attend events that set the social hierarchy for the whole season. The mansion would be ablaze with lights, and all its splendid rooms were banked with masses of flowers. Just an overwhelming display of wealth and power. Yet beneath this glittering pageant, many people were playing their parts in a secret supporting cast, using these very public rituals to subtly navigate their private, often hidden lives. Every gesture, every seemingly tiny detail, every nuance of conversation could carry a second, more intimate meaning. A discreet signal understood only by those in the know. Discretion was everything, and these rituals were the grammar of that discretion.
Okay, stepping away from the grand ballrooms for a minute, let's explore some of the actual sanctuaries of style and desire. Places where these hidden lives not only flourished, but actually influenced the culture. We have this fascinating, really groundbreaking example in Elsie de Wolfe, the interior designer, and Elizabeth Bessie Marbury, the theatrical agent. They've been called, quite rightly I think, the Victorian lesbian power couple. What made their partnership so significant? How did they carve out this space?
They absolutely epitomized it. Elsie de Wolfe and Elizabeth Bessie Marbury lived together in a brownstone near Union Square from 1892 to 1911. Their home, which was actually Washington Irving's old mansion, became much more than just a residence. It transformed into this dynamic hub, intellectual, artistic, social life. Every Sunday, their drawing room became what was famously called a glorified Ellis Island of talent. You really never knew who you might run into there. There's a true salon, a place where ideas and, frankly, unconventional lives could intersect pretty openly. at least for those privileged enough to get invited.
And the guest list was truly impressive, wasn't it? I mean, they entertained everyone from Oscar Wilde.
Who happened to be one of Marbury's clients, yeah.
Right. To figures like Sarah Bernhardt, literary giants like Henry James, leading architects, suffragists, even foreign dignitaries. It sounds like quite the melting pot. Definitely defies the typical image of a stuffy, conventional Victorian salon.
Indeed. In a society where, wardrobe and manners defined one's class and rigidly dictated public life, De Wolfe and Marbury subtly but powerfully challenged norms, not just through their personal lifestyle, but through their very professions. De Wolfe, often called America's first professional interior decorator, she revolutionized home design. Moved away from the heavy, dark, cluttered Victorian look. She redecorated rooms in bold, light, comfortable styles. Famously declared, "I believe in plenty of optimism and white paint." A radical idea then. Meanwhile, Marbury, as a theatrical agent, she brokered avant-garde plays, bringing cutting-edge European theater to New York. A contemporary report, fascinatingly, even called them New York's fashionable lesbian couple. Openly acknowledged, though maybe couched in euphemisms for the public. De Wolfe's creed for comfort was about creating rooms to suit the people who must live in them, prioritizing personal expression. She famously designed the Colony Club in 1905, Manhattan's first women's-only club, creating a distinctly woman's domain with interiors that were light, airy, a stark contrast to the heavy masculine clubs of the era. It was a space designed by women, for women, reflecting this growing sense of female autonomy.
That's such a stark contrast to the heavy, dark interiors we usually associate with the era. Sounds like a deliberate rejection of those stifling norms. Now let's move across town to a different kind of sanctuary. A more bohemian brotherhood that sounds incredibly intriguing. The Benedict and its infamous sewer club. What was this all about?
It's an absolutely wild and pivotal story.
Right.
The Benedict, it was this rather squat, unassuming Victorian apartment building at 80 Washington Square East. But by 1888, it housed this fascinating circle of mostly married artists and architects who formed a private men's club there. And they audaciously, quite humorously, named it the Sewer Club. A cheeky, defiant rebuke to Puritan critics of their unconventional lifestyles. A contemporary journalist, clearly scandalized, complained about these bachelor apartments where men were destitute of manly pride, and by implication, vicious also, naturally. Danny, but the club's leaders, the celebrated architect Stanford White and the sculptor Augustus St. Gaudens, they were utterly unfazed. In fact, they openly embraced their notoriety and reputation for bohemian excess.
So these were artistic dandies who not only entertained each other in costume in camp, but whose letters were filled with affection and double entendres. I understand they even signed off with KMA. Wow. I imagine that was quite the inside joke. A very bold statement for the time.
Oh, it was utterly audacious. KMA, reportedly standing for Kiss My Ass. A playful, defiant jab, right? Delivered within the intimate confines of their private letters. St. Gaudens famously called White "my beloved Snooks" and teased him with lines like, "I'm your man to dine, drink, fuck, bugger," as such, metaphorically speaking. A clear wink and nod to their deep intimacy and, well, sexual fluidity. This intimate circle, painters, architects, sculptors, including White's close colleague Joseph Wells, they truly lived openly between genders within their private artistic enclaves. They were experimenting with identities and expressions that went way beyond conventional norms in their studios and private spaces. And the impact of this group, immense, far beyond their personal lives. These hidden artisans produced some of America's most sublime design, shaped the whole aesthetic of the country. Think of McKim, Mead and White's masterpieces, the original Penn Station, Madison Square Garden, the Boston Public Library. Even today, a modern brochure acknowledges their bachelor apartment guild as bound by a complex web of affections. A subtle yet unmistakable coded acknowledgement of their true relationships. This wasn't just a social circle. It was a nexus of artistic and personal rebellion.
From the bohemian artists to the glittering socialites, let's turn now to one of the most flamboyant figures of the era, King Harry Lehr. This man, he was a social chameleon, a celebrated wit, a favorite of social arbiters like Mrs. Astor, and the notoriously irreverent Mamie Fish. Famous for throwing the most outlandish parties, the kind that filled newspaper columns like that infamous Dog's Dinner.
Oh yeah, the Dog's Dinner, where 100 pedigree pets in custom tuxedos were served a lavish meal at tiny tables while their human owners watched, laughing. Lehr was the ultimate campy court jester of Gilded Age society. He was effusive, witty, had this mischievous charm that could make even the stuffiest dowager dissolve into laughter. He really understood the theatricality of it all. But behind the laughter, the outrageous parties, the constant performance, Lehr harbored this profound, deeply guarded secret. In 1901, he entered into a marriage of convenience with the heiress Elizabeth Bessie Drexel. His main motivation, as she later revealed, was to secure wealth and status. What followed was a marriage that Bessie herself described as nothing short of a tragic farce.
And the details of that wedding night confession are truly startling, aren't they? He handed her a letter, only revealed decades later, where he wrote with just astonishing bluntness for the time, "I do not love you, I can never love you. Our marriage will never be a marriage in anything but name." And then, women are actually repulsive to me. Wow, that's an incredible level of raw honesty, especially given the era's rigid expectations.
It was an act of brutal honesty, delivered in a world that otherwise allowed him very little direct expression of his true self. After his death, Bessie found his private diaries, which confirmed his feelings. Detailed things like, "I can never love any woman." The diaries painted this love story of David and Jonathan, hinting at a deep, long-term male partner, the charming Charles Greenay. And as if to underline it, Bessie discovered a nude male portrait hanging intimately over his bed. Blair's public persona was that of a walker, a confirmed bachelor who expertly accompanied wealthy, often single or widowed women to social events. Filling the role of escort and confidant, he relished performing this role. He dressed in drag in private gatherings, sang for his hostess friends, styled himself one of the girls, even taught society women about fashion and decor. Yet, incredibly, most society matrons seemed largely oblivious to his true self. They just saw the entertaining, harmless companion.
This really demonstrates how his campy style and costume habits were so much more than just eccentricity. They were a highly sophisticated survival strategy, using marriage and class as queer survival strategies. His very public performance of this flamboyant, gender-bending socialite allowed him to exist in that deeply heteronormative society while covertly pursuing his true affections privately.
Absolutely. His life was a testament to how immense wealth and social privilege could provide this unique, powerful form of cover, insulating him from scrutiny that would ruin lesser men. And Lair wasn't alone in forming these coded relationships, these intimate alliances. Consider the fascinating phenomenon of Boston marriages and romantic friendships among women of this era. Alice Austen, the pioneering photographer, and Gertrude Tate, a schoolteacher. They lived together on Staten Island for an astonishing 55 years as life partners. Their private letters filled with deep affection. Alice signing off "Your own Gert," Gertrude responding "My dear Alice," offer poignant, undeniable evidence of their devotion. While society might have just dismissed them as eccentric, odd women, they meticulously carved out a life of lesbian love long before there were words for it, created their own domestic sanctuary.
And this wasn't an isolated incident, right? This kind of intimate female partnership was surprisingly common among affluent Gilded Age women. These romantic friendships involving deep adoration, sharing a home, often mirroring conventional marriage in all but name. It speaks to a kind of hidden, unspoken network of intimacy among women.
It was, yeah. And it was often tolerated because it didn't really disrupt the patriarchal social order. In fact, it kind of supported it by allowing women to remain unmarried, available to care for parents or manage estates, while still fulfilling their emotional needs with female partners. And for men, especially those with means, the grand tour of Europe often provided this essential escape. Young men of Lair's class would spend months, sometimes years, away from prying eyes in cities like Rome or Paris. They came back with art, poetry, but also, as historians now piece together, perhaps a discreet romance. Letters from figures like Henry James to the sculptor Hendrik Andersen. "My dear, dear, dearest Hendrik, I wish I could go to Rome and put my hands on you." Reveal passionate, protective affection. Intense emotional bonds that could only be expressed in such coded, private ways, often only known later through scholarly work. Travel essentially offered anonymity. A space where men could care for each other beyond the scrutiny of New York society. It was a temporary reprieve, a chance to breathe.
And even within New York itself, high society clubs, exclusive resorts, they also served as crucial meeting places, didn't they? Places like Sherry's Restaurant, Newport's Ballrooms, the Grand Hotel Plaza. They weren't just social stages. They were also, remarkably, private enclaves.
Exactly. Gay men with means could attend these glittering gatherings, playing the socially accepted role of dutiful companion to some powerful matron, thereby securing their presence, and then discreetly meet others of their kind within the same space. Affection moved in whispers, a lingering glance across the ballroom, a coded gift exchanged over champagne, a brush of pinkies during a waltz. It really reaffirms how the secrecy of the closet, as we understand it today, this complete stifling concealment, it's not quite applicable to figures like Lair or White. Instead, they found cover in wealth, in spectacle, in the very public nature of their lives, turning normative trappings into queer fortresses. Their social prominence paradoxically became a shield, allowing them to lead surprisingly rich and intimate lives, albeit on the margins of explicit public recognition. They were masters of discreet performance.
No,
It's abundantly clear that this hidden queer culture had a profound impact, shaping not just individual lives and relationships, but the whole aesthetic of the era itself. Let's delve now into what we're calling the aesthetic code, design as queer language, starting with the American invasion of none other than Oscar Wilde in January 1882. He caused an absolute sensation, didn't he?
He was a phenomenon, truly. Wilde's Manhattan debut was this meticulously choreographed sensation. He appeared on stage for his lectures with his signature wild hair, a vibrant coat, and a lily in his buttonhole. Presented himself as the self-styled apostle of aestheticism. He was the quintessential dandy and effete peacock adorned with a cello-shaped coat, lily boutonnieres, and often a green carnation, which was a secret wink to insiders, known as a subtle symbol of same-sex desire. His message was simple, yet revolutionary for the time: beauty for beauty's sake. Arguing that art needed no moral purpose beyond its inherent beauty, he championed turning sentiment into spectacle, making life itself a work of art. His mannerisms felt coded, delivering this cloaked language of indulgence filled with floral metaphors and half-concealed compliments. It was a performance, yes, but one that resonated deeply.
To a modern listener, that phrase beauty for beauty's sake and his flamboyant style just screams camp. It's the very hallmark of flair, defiant style, a deliberate theatricality that, today's queer communities often reclaim with pride. Was it seen that way back then?
You're absolutely right. The echoes of camp are undeniable. But to his Gilded Age audience, particularly those receptive to his message, it was a genuine creed, a permission slip to adore art in themselves. Aestheticism, as a movement, emphasized sensation, artifice, a rejection of the utilitarian. For individuals whose desires were considered unnatural or immoral, embracing a philosophy that prioritized beauty, sensuality, self-expression, regardless of conventional morality, that was incredibly liberating. Wilde became a celebrity sensation. His look, his lifestyle, widely reproduced, embodying the very essence of aestheticism. This cultural shift, prioritizing beauty and artifice, provided fertile ground for hidden expressions of identity, a language of signs that only those in the know could truly interpret.
And building these cathedrals of beauty, the physical embodiments of this aesthetic, was none other than Stanford White, New York's most celebrated architect. He designed palaces for the robber barons, and his work seems to perfectly embody this aesthetic code we're discussing.
Absolutely. White's buildings were much more than just structures. They were performance space in their own right. Physical show houses for society's dramas, a testament to extravagant taste. Think of the monumental Morgan Library, the iconic Washington Square Arch, the grandeur of the original Penn Station and Madison Square Garden, all bore his distinctive, theatrical, lavishly ornamented style. White himself, just as flamboyant as his designs, described as projecting color and lots of it, with his bright blue fright coats, a waxed mustache, and hair so red that even at night, Stanley White looked like a firelight. His architectural philosophy was clear. Extreme beauty was a virtue. The Frick Mansion, which he helped design, famously quotes, "Can one desire too much of a good thing?" above its doorway. In a society where same-sex desire was often distrusted, even condemned, aestheticizing life, creating spaces of overwhelming beauty became this powerful, sophisticated way to have both beauty and the freedom behind it, a discreet rebellion in stone and plaster.
If White built the grand theatrical show, then Louis Comfort Tiffany, the son of the famous jeweler, he filled those interiors with magic, splashing rainbows through rooms. His work seems to perfectly complement White's grand designs, almost like the inner lining of some magnificent garment.
Tiffany was America's undisputed master of interior design, creating an immersive hymn to beauty within these grand spaces. He transformed rooms with his revolutionary stained glass panels, gilded mosaics that shimmered with light, his iconic dragonfly lamps casting enchanting jewel-toned glows. For queer artists and patrons, these interiors became home base, places where the salon to speak in code could truly flourish. These spaces were filled with incredibly specific coded symbols: lilies, Wilde's emblem, peacocks, a long-standing gay sign of vanity and pride, often linked to aestheticism, delicate Japanese fans, kimono patterns, lush peonies, dancing nymphs, a palette rich in deep reds and velvets. Even colors could be coded: lavender carpets, the soft green of corsage ribbons. These rooms, when you look at them through a modern queer lens, absolutely read as camp, deliberate excess and style that wink at the audience, inviting a knowing insider interpretation. They weren't just beautiful, they were intimate sanctuaries where personal expressions could flourish, hidden in plain sight.
And these aesthetic codes extended into the very social fabric, didn't they? Particularly at glittering events like the Delmonico's balls. These were known as sumptuous spectacles. A sea of dresses and tails, two orchestras booming, walls draped with vines and palms. But you're suggesting they weren't just about surface splendor.
They were the ultimate social theaters. While on the surface, everyone performed rigid heteronormative pageantry that required dances, formal introductions, public displays of appropriate affection. Backstage, so to speak, these rituals had second meanings. Dance partners might exchange a knowing glance, unseen by the crowd, a subtle affirmation. Gentlemen might toast by subtly brushing pinkies, a gesture like an inside joke, signifying connection beyond the polite. Even the music choice by the orchestra could hint at a coded subtext for those who could hear it. These balls, despite their public grandeur, functioned as safe houses of expression, a precious chance to slip a look or a laugh that only the insiders would understand. Moments of genuine connection woven into the fabric of public performance.
It's astonishing to realize that the hidden pulse of queer culture in the Gilded Age ran not through, underground speakeasies or shadowy alleys, as we might imagine later on, but through the very fabric of elite life. Those who made the art salons, shaped the tastes, built the ballrooms, the trendsetters, the power brokers, were so often lovers of art and each other. It wasn't fringe, it was absolutely core.
Exactly. This aesthetic code, this profound focus on extreme beauty, on artifice, on the deliberate creation of exquisite environments, became both a cause and a cover for queer individuals. It allowed them to express themselves, find kinship, cultivate deep, meaningful relationships in a society that otherwise demanded suffocating conformity. Every gilded cornice, every Tiffany window casting rainbow light, every meticulously chosen flower and bouquet was, in a sense, a kiss from history, a clandestine language of resistance and a powerful, if quiet, statement of self. It truly was a story of survival, creativity, and profound influence, woven right into American culture.
So we've talked about the coded aesthetic and the social rituals, but let's get down to the brass tacks of physical space. How did this architecture of secrecy specifically facilitate these hidden lives? Let's start with Manhattan's discreet hideaways, particularly the bachelor apartment buildings.
These new types of buildings, like 80 Washington Square East, which housed the Benedict, they were absolutely crucial. While advertised publicly as just straightforward lodging for single men, a respectable option for gentlemen not yet married, or those choosing to remain bachelors, they became, inside, safe private space for sexual nonconformists to glitter and be gay. The notorious Sewer Club, as we mentioned, led by Stanford White and Augustus St. Gaudens, famously rented rooms there for their private parties and illicit encounters. These plain front apartments were transformed into private backrooms, exquisitely decorated, filled with art, where men could shed their public personas and truly be themselves, out of sight of prying Victorian morality. It was a testament to their ingenuity in navigating a restrictive society, building literal fortresses of freedom.
And Stanford White himself, the renowned architect, had a particularly intriguing secret boudoir, didn't he? I've heard stories of his incredibly lavish and private love nest at 22 West 24th Street. It sounds like something out of a novel.
It was legendary, really, a true manifestation of his hidden world. While his public Fifth Avenue house had an ornate billiard room and grand entertaining spaces, his true love nest was this secret apartment. From the street, it looked like an ordinary 5-story brick building. It gave absolutely no hint of the theatricality within. But inside, White created what his guests described as a seducer's love nest, a room painted deep, enveloping green, plush velvet couches, colored lights shifting the mood. Most famously, it featured that red velvet swing hanging from ivy-twined ropes, an object of playful, sensual abandon. Other visitors described mirrored walls lining the suite, turning every angle into a performance, a space for self-adoration and spectacle. These were intimate stage and secret hideout, visible enough for White's undeniable taste for drama, yet meticulously concealed from polite society. It highlights how the spaces themselves were active participants in the cloak and dagger work. Hidden doors, strategic layouts, opulent design concealing their true purpose. White even designed commissions for others, like the residents of 25 East 78th Street for Stuyvesant Fish, with discreet servant staircases and corridors, explicitly allowing guests to slip in and out without notice. This shows an architectural understanding of the absolute need for privacy and discretion in a society obsessed with appearances.
That sounds like a masterclass in architectural subterfuge, a deliberate crafting of spaces for hidden desires. And this architectural strategy extended beyond Manhattan, didn't it? To the lavish summer cottages and grand estates of Newport, Rhode Island.
It absolutely did. Take the Breakers, the Vanderbilt's ostentatious 70-room summer cottage. While it was unequivocally meant for society pageantry, for ostentatious displays of wealth and power, its gilded halls and marble gazebos also provided a ready stage for queer style and discreet interactions. When Oscar Wilde lectured at Newport's Casino Theater in 1882, his flamboyant attire struck a child in the audience as rather queer, than meaning eccentric or unusual, but in hindsight, yeah, it carried that powerful double meaning, hinting at the underlying nonconformity that infused the aesthetic movement. Newport playboys like Harry Lehr also lived this paradox: public display and intense discretion. He threw his most outrageous parties at his personal cottage, Arley, like the famous Dog's Dinner, designed to shock and entertain. Yet all the while he quietly maintained his rumored long-term relationship with Charles Greenough. Newport's secret parties, its true intimacies, often happened in the bowels of palaces, whose golden facades, paradoxically, seemed to proudly conceal them, offering perfect, opulent camouflage.
So the very opulence and immense scale of these structures could be used as a kind of camouflage, allowing discretion to be built right into the fabric of elite life. But this brings us to a crucial and frankly heartbreaking question: who gets to hide? Because clearly not everyone had access to these architectures of secrecy or the immense privilege required to live a hidden queer life.
That's the absolutely critical point, the stark, often brutal difference in how these parallel queer lives were experienced. For New York's wealthiest, discretion often came at a direct price. Quite literally, elite patrons of town topics, that notorious society weekly specializing in thinly veiled gossip, they literally paid to suppress gossip. The editor, William Dalton Mann, famously bragged, "I have cartloads of stories locked up in my safe that would turn New York upside down." Use these rumors as a form of currency. A man or woman with immense means and social standing could simply hush a scandal with a check or through powerful influence, ensuring their secrets remain safely within those gilded walls, far from public condemnation.
But for those without that privilege, without that extraordinary wealth or social standing, the dangers of exposure were constant, immediate, and often brutal.
Exactly. The contrast couldn't be sharper. Downtown, in dim, backroom bars like the Black Rabbit at 183 Bleecker Street, fairies, flamboyantly effeminate young men, entertained male patrons. These were places of refuge, yes, but they were prosaic and gritty, lacking the elaborate concealment of uptown mansions, and therefore, tragically, easy prey for prudes and police. When the notorious vice crusader Anthony Comstock raided the Black Rabbit in 1900, he thundered that Sodom and Gomorrah would blush for shame, using the most inflammatory language to condemn the men found there. These rare havens offered refuge only until prejudice and law enforcement burst in, often leading to arrests, public humiliation, ruin. You see this vividly in figures like Antonio Bellavicini, an Italian-born bartender arrested in 1916 at a known cruising spot near the Navy Yard. Charged with running a disorderly house, a euphemism for illicit sexual activity, branded a degenerate and vagrant in public records, sent to the workhouse. A married father of 5, he had no one to quietly buy his silence or shield him from the law. His life was publicly destroyed, highlighting the harsh reality for those without the means to purchase privacy.
And in a cruel, ironic twist, even for some of the elites, the very extravagance that had insulated them could, in certain circumstances, become their undoing. James Hazen Hyde's notorious Versailles-themed costume ball in 1905, for example. Utterly dazzling, but ultimately led to his public downfall. How did that happen?
It's a fascinating cautionary tale. Hyde's ball was a spectacle of unparalleled grandeur, a full replica of Marie Antoinette's Petit Trianon. Guests dressed as historical figures, lavish food, champagne flowing. The New York Times splashed headlines about his splendid costume fate, printing full guest lists, detailed descriptions of jeweled costumes. Essentially turned his private party into a public sensation. But that dazzling publicity, it proved Hyde's undoing. Elite board members of the powerful Equitable Life Assurance Society, which he led, seized on the headlines, accused him of being too frivolous for serious business, effectively forced him out of his position, even out of the country. In his case, the very same extravagance and public display that had insulated Hyde from direct moral condemnation by presenting it as eccentric wealth rather than anything deviant, ironically became the stage for his public downfall, proving that even with immense wealth, there were severe limits to how visible one could be. New York's queer history in this era was truly a tale of two worlds. Wealth and privilege could suppress a scandal or buy a secret room, while without them, a single glance could lead to ruin. A life destroyed by public exposure.
As we draw closer to the present, let's consider the enduring legacy of this era, particularly how these Gilded Age aesthetics and coded expressions continue to resonate today. It's a fascinating connection, the then and now. Almost like the past is winking at us from across the centuries.
It truly is.
Yeah.
Elsie de Wolf's rebel style, her groundbreaking use of light fabrics, airy spaces, 18th century French furniture. It was more than just a passing trend. It was a subtle code of comfort and intimacy, a rejection of Victorian heaviness that ushered in a whole new era of interior design. And Stanford White's dramatic interiors, like his infamous emerald green room with its audacious red velvet swing, they've left an indelible mark on architectural history. Still discussed, marveled at today. What's particularly striking is how a queer actor on the contemporary Gilded Age TV show points out that while the late 19th century wasn't a time when queer people could live openly, we now know they existed, loved, and found ways to carve out spaces for themselves. The period's grand facades hid those spaces, but they were there in every mirror's reflection, reflected in the art, the architecture, the coded language.
And these hidden narratives were communicated in such a nuanced, whispered way, weren't they? Women, for instance, wrote in code, wanted each other to conceal or burn letters, used metaphors or allusion to describe their most intimate relationships. It's like a puzzle for historians to piece together now.
Exactly. Their stories were often subtly woven into public records or memoirs, recycled in myth or magazine fluff, with discreet hints left for those in the know. For example, a profile on Elsie de Wolf and Bessie Marbury might describe Elsie's bedroom color scheme, pink and delicate mauve with a fur-covered chaise, as if the decor alone explained their relationship, implicitly signaling something more. Marbury's 1923 memoir, while groundbreaking for its time, would only call Elsie her companion and sister, and carefully state she'd never fallen in love with a real man. A common euphemism then. Even when de Wolf famously married a diplomat in 1926, New York Times headline, while celebrating Lady Mendel, still pointedly noted, when in New York she makes her home with Miss Elizabeth Marbury. Those little sides were breadcrumbs, clues left behind in yellowed newsprint. We, in the modern age, with different social contexts, more open scholarship, we can now piece them together, reading between those lines to uncover the full richness of these lives.
And these buried narratives are truly coloring our culture again today, aren't they? You see it in fashion, on social media, in the way contemporary queer creators are reclaiming and evoking this gilded past. It's a powerful act of recognition and reclamation.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful cycle of reappropriation. You'll see a drag queen swirling in a silk bustle gown on TikTok, reimagining the grandeur. Or an influencer with lace parasols using hashtags like #NeoVictorian, drawing inspiration. Contemporary queer creators are evoking this gilded past, sometimes knowingly, sometimes intuitively, reclaiming its distinctive codes and symbols. Out magazine, for instance, did a memorable Gilded Age fashion shoot, directly referencing this period. And it's incredibly telling that fans of the Gilded Age TV show will write in saying, "I see myself in John Adams' story." Connecting with historical figures personally, what was once omitted from textbooks, buried or silenced, is now reappearing on podcasts like ours, museum blogs, pride exhibits, queer fashion feeds. A pastel rococo mirror isn't just antique anymore. It's now understood as a wink at an elegant secret history, a symbol of resilience and coded expression. This is a powerful, ongoing reclamation, demonstrating that queer people have always been part of the story, even if history hasn't always chosen to spotlight them. The design that cloaked a secret love story is now the frame through which we see our own histories reflected, a bridge connecting us to the past.
As the chandeliers dim and the last waltz fades into silence, let's transport ourselves back, just for a moment, to the Marble House Ballroom. The grand space is now silent, the candles guttered, and the ghosts of the revelers of Harry Lair, Elsie de Wolf, countless others slowly fade back into the rich tapestry of history.
But their stories, as we've meticulously uncovered them today, they remain. They powerfully reiterate our central theme. Queerness wasn't merely tolerated or cast aside at the fringes. It was woven into the very fabric of society. It was, in fact, foundational to how high society functioned and evolved, not some incidental detail. We've seen it from Elsie and Bessie's elegant salons, entertaining figures like Oscar Wilde shaping the cultural landscape. We've explored Harry Lair's public flamboyance, a brilliant performance masking his true affections. We've stepped into Stanford White's meticulously designed hidden love nest, a sanctuary of private desires. And we've recognized that stark, often painful contrast between the privacy afforded by elite wealth and the dangerous exposure faced by working-class queer individuals. Every gilded door, every mirrored wall in those opulent mansions quite literally contains a story of secret love, chosen family, and courageous self-expression. These stories are a testament to the incredible queer excellence woven into the very fabric of elite New York society.
And this isn't just history for history's sake. The seemingly frivolous excess of the Gilded Age was, in many ways, a smokescreen. But underneath it, beneath the layers of silk and stripped etiquette, was real feeling, real love, and genuinely innovative lives being lived. As scholars and historians continue to remind us, marriage and family, gender and sexuality are far more intricate, mobile, and malleable than we imagine. Those gilded walls held every bit of human complexity and profound connection.
Their lives serve as a powerful reminder that despite immense social pressures, rigid expectations, connection, and identity found a way to flourish, to thrive, even if it meant crafting sophisticated facades and mastering coded languages. They were, in their own right, pioneers in navigating identity in a world that often sought to erase or condemn them. They really paved the way.
So, to today's queer listener, I say, these ghosts are yours, claim them. The Gilded Age was not a world where we stood quietly at the margins, waiting to be acknowledged. We danced right in the middle, shaping culture, influencing design, living lives of deep love and longing. We should carry the laughter and the longing of those who loved when they had to whisper. Their opulent world was, after all, one of profound coded expression. The music has stopped, but the legacy plays on. Keep dancing, claim this inheritance, and carry their light.